So we're here in the Walters Art Museum in Baltimore, Maryland in the Near Eastern Art section looking at an impressive low-relief sculpture called Relief with Winged Genius.
This particular piece of work was part of a series of reliefs that decorated the walls of the palace of Ashur-Nisir-Pal II at Nimrud in Assyria. In the Walters Art Museum, this particular piece of work is surrounded by other items that we would most likely also see in a palace, like seals, motifs, amulets, figurines, and tablets, but nothing as impressive as this relief with winged genius.
Now let's get back into the work. Upon entering this section of the museum, one is challenged by the massive size of this low-relief sculpture. The relief is roughly 8 feet by 4 feet and is divided into 4 registers depicting a large winged man facing the right of the composition while holding a bucket in his left hand, which is lowered to his side. In the other hand, he is holding a date, which is positioned at the same level as his mouth, but facing the date towards the right. This composition is very balanced and symmetrical with equal distribution of the body.
The particular way that his body is positioned is known as twisted perspective, which is when part of the figure is shown in profile and the other part is shown frontally. The figure in this relief is actually a demigod and meant to be a protector for the king.
Due to the size of this piece, it is apparent that this individual was very important and possessed a lot of power. This can be seen through the musculature of the calves and arms that peek out from underneath his decorative robe, which is decorated with feathers and tassels, with what appear to be knives tucked into it.
Right, power is also shown through the horned headdress and the jewelry that the figure is wearing. A headdress is typically only worn by the king or members of the royal family, and jewelry is only worn by those who are rich and hold power in Assyrian society.
Going off of that, it is surprising that here we see the figure is wearing sandals. Oftentimes, when depicting an important figure that is meant to show power, it is done by also showing a connection of the figure with the divine. This is normally characterized through the lack of shoes that a particular figure would wear, but in this case, the figure is wearing sandals. This seems odd because the figure was meant to protect the king.
Good point. Now let's take a closer look at the second to last register from the bottom. As you can see, there is something a little bit different about this register compared to all the other ones. There's cuneiform text that overlaps the figure. This text describes the victories and greatness of King Ashur-Nisir-Pal and describes the building of the palace.
So we've been talking about this Assyrian society and particular aspects that characterize the society, but what about this piece makes it distinctly Assyrian?
Well, we know that this figure is Assyrian due to the knots that are present in his beard. This is common characteristic of Assyrian art. Not only that, but this low-relief sculpture, much like many other low-relief sculptures of this time period, is made of alabaster, which is a very strong type of stone that was built to last. This shows that the protection of the king was also meant to be long-lasting, much like the stone. Also, the stone is very smooth and dull in appearance.
As previously discussed, the genius is holding a bucket in his left hand and a date in the other. The bucket was meant to be representative of the nourishment that the king could provide for his people. According to the description present in the museum, it is stated there was originally another panel connected to this one that depicted a date palm, which was held very sacred to the Assyrian people because it provides food, drink, shelter, and water. Something that cannot be seen from looking at this relief now is that it was originally painted with red, white, blue, and gold in order to show the importance of the figure and increasing the visual impact.
Getting back into the context a little bit, this low-relief sculpture was made under the reign of Ashur-Nisir-Pal II around 883 BC to 859 BC. In Nimrud in Assyria at a later date, roughly 645 BC, was another set of Assyrian relief sculptures that line the hallways of a palace entitled Ashurbanipal Hunting Lions, from Ashurbanipal's North Palace. This particular figure shows Ashurbanipal hunting lions in a controlled hunt.
Again, we can see the typical headdress used to denote important figures common in Assyrian work. This particular story told in this sculpture is meant to show the king's strength and power over nature to any foreigners and/or visitors to the king's palace, which contrasts with the purpose of relief with winged genius, that the king is protected by gods and therefore meant to be the ruler of the kingdom.
Also, it's important to note that both reliefs are made out of alabaster, thus, as talked about before, enforcing the ruler's everlasting power and legacy. The relief with winged genius is a magnificent piece, not only due to its size, narrative, and decorative depiction of the genius, but also due to its ability to emphasize the king's power and ability.